Jennifer Gomez. I'm a clinical psychology doctoral student out of the College of Arts and Sciences. So I specifically research trauma with a focus on physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. And I use it doing two different theoretical lines. So the first is Jennifer Fry's betrayal trauma theory. She's a professor here, which looks at the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator and how that might exacerbate outcomes if the perpetrator is someone close or trusted upon by the person who's victimized. So you can think of that as like a father who sexually abuses their daughter. That's a betrayal trauma that's toxic for outcomes. What I've done then from betrayal trauma theory is develop cultural betrayal trauma theory, which takes the same idea of this implicit interpersonal trust and puts it in the context of minority populations. So if you have an African-American woman who is abused by an African-American man, there is an implicit trust between the two people, both as minorities of the same group, that's violated through this abuse, through the sexual abuse, and looking at that and related to outcomes. And so my dissertation was on cultural betrayal trauma theory, and I found that it predicted diverse outcomes like PTSD, dissociation, things you would expect, as well as other things like internalized prejudice and changes to ethnic identity and things that are less often looked at in relation to trauma. And so my work has really gone down these two lines with betrayal trauma theory and cultural betrayal trauma theory. The thing of it is that what a theory does is it sort of just crystallizes and names a lot of phenomenon that other people have been looking at for years. So nothing in the theory is brand new. Intracultural trust, which is this implicit trust between minorities, is similar to racial loyalty, which is a construct already in the literature. And so in some ways, it just brings together things from attachment theory, from betrayal trauma theory, from ethnic minority psychology, from women of color feminisms, and puts it into one place to really contextualize the experience for minorities, and then how interpersonal trauma and violence then is affected by that greater context of societal inequality. So in some ways then it's new, and in some ways it's a good build upon what's already been done. I grew up as a ballet dancer. I started when I was 12. I joined Dance Theater of Harlem when I was 17, and I danced there for 5 years. I had no plans to go to college, so I never took my SATs or anything like that. Once I retired, I moved back to California, went to community college. I was able to get on an NIH grant, Bridges to the Baccalaureate Scholar, which is for underrepresented minorities in the sciences, and getting them from community college hooked into research labs at the university in the hopes they'll then go on to get PhDs in the sciences. And so I began doing research at San Diego State University my freshman year, researching dating violence, and I continued that and then applied to U of O. I got the Graduate School Promising Scholar Award here, which was a great recruitment tool, and really showed me that UO was interested in the type of work that I did and that I could bring, and came here after that. I think in reflecting on this, there's been quite a few challenges, and some of which I don't think are surprising, given that University of Oregon is housed in a country that is rife with inequality. So some things I've experienced are racial discrimination from faculty and from undergraduate students. As a GTF, I work with students. Also sexual harassment from male undergraduate students. And even as a trauma researcher, not having a name for that, since I was the person technically in power, but societally the male students had more power than me. Another thing that I think might be more specific to UO, but isn't, certainly UO didn't create this phenomenon, is retaliation for speaking out about issues. I found myself with the high-profile case of sexual violence on this campus and inequality on this campus, speaking out quite a bit and more than I anticipated, and getting kind of a double-edged sword of a tremendous amount of support from faculty, staff, and graduate students in my own department of psychology, and other places at the university, like Jane Arungu at CMAE, Black Strategies Group, Alliance for Graduate Students, but also quite a fair amount of retaliation as well for speaking out. And that came interpersonally, as well as sometimes, I don't know how to say it, actually, with a grade being docked in ways that are more measurable. And so that's been difficult. It's been difficult to watch my advisor, Dr. Jennifer Fried, who's nationally recognized and world-renowned, experience a high level of retaliation here at U of O. And it's been painful to see and to watch it happen and not have any control over that. It's been painful for me to be lumped as one of Jennifer's students or in Jennifer's lab, and therefore she is being harmful to me, or she is making me think something or making me say something. And I find that assumption very insulting. I adore her, and we do agree on many things, and I'm also a 31-year-old black woman, so the assumption that a middle-aged white woman could be pulling the strings and I don't have a mind of my own, I have found really insulting and disconcerting. Another thing that may seem more indirect but isn't is that 2 buildings here at UO are named after white supremacists, Dee Dee Hall and Dunn Hall, and it's been a year and a half at least of this being really high profile, trying to get these names changed. And so I appreciate the transparency that President Schill is doing, and also am frustrated by the slow process and by what I perceive as a clear communication of the priorities on this campus, despite the priorities being stated otherwise to be more equality and inclusivity. Dee Dee and Dunn Hall, it communicates something very different for me. When I came here, the culture seemed so different from what I know, and in my cohort, people spoke differently. I speak much more directly and more passionately than a lot is the norm, so that was weird. I'm a non-traditional student, so I'm older, so I have references that are different from other people. And what I was probably most surprised at is my cohort in psychology. We are thick as thieves and super tight, and me getting the advice from Gordon Hall and other people of like, give them a chance, and if they seem different, if you talk to them, then maybe you'll see something else and have some commonalities and some similarities. And so I never would have expected to find, especially after I got here, a home in the psychology department at the UO and even in academia, because it seems so foreign to me. And so being able to discover people who appear very different and have different backgrounds in a lot of respects, have developed such camaraderie and support and genuine acceptance and all of those things. I think also this campus has a tremendous amount of people and resources that at first blush you might miss. So I joined the Black Strategies group, which developed while I was here, and my first meeting, I had no idea there were that many black people on campus, period, at all, much less people in positions of power and authority. And I've been part of the Black Strategies group as it's growing and has officers and leaderships and executive board and all of these things that can really help on college campus. The Alliance of Graduate Students for Diversity has been a constant source of support, and they put on courageous conversations where 2 or 3 times a term, typically, you come in and talk about specific issues of being a graduate student and inequality. And so that's across different graduate programs and is open to the community and to the whole campus, and so you get a lot of different perspectives there. I also got hooked in with CMAE a little bit by being asked to give a talk about institutional betrayal in the form of exclusion here at UO when the murder, I would call murder, of Michael Brown happened in Ferguson, and there were a lot of protests and unrest, and the UO, to my knowledge, was silent on the issue for months. And so I gave a talk that said, you know, this type of silencing is really problematic and is very damaging. And in reflection, it was so interesting because I was giving a talk about silencing, but I was giving the talk by U of O, asked by U of O, and so I think it really shows the diversity and the heterogeneity of this university, that it is open. A lot of places are open to have these types of discussions and these types of dialogues that are very difficult to have and that people have very strong feelings about on either side. And so, yeah, I think all those things. And of course, I'm sure I've mentioned it a million times, but Jennifer Freyd, I'm fairly certain I would have dropped out if not for Jennifer. So having her as a interpersonal support, professional support, a great model for fighting the good fight and doing the right thing amidst a lot of pressure has been tremendously valuable for me. And she's a brilliant professor and resource here at UO. Someone who's just coming to the U of O would be perhaps to, of course, be invested in your work here and in what you do, but not imprisoned by it. And so something that has gotten me through is knowing that I could leave. And if things got bad enough, then I would be able to leave. And that helped me not to feel trapped. It also helped me to say, well, if that's the case, then this environment has to be healthy for you. So what needs to happen for it to be healthy? And a lot of times what needs to happen is you need to say no. Say no, stop, take a break, pull back. As a Black woman, I often feel a lot of pressure if there's anything related to inequality come up, or racism, or anything. And as a sexual violence researcher, of course, anything with trauma comes up. I feel really compelled to do something and to say something about it. And on the one hand, that's been very fulfilling and helps me not to feel helpless. On the other hand, I've worn myself too thin by doing that at times. So being able to kind of keep your eye on the prize, that you're developing habits, skills now that will carry with you into your future career, whatever that is. And so if you create and foster really bad habits now in ways that aren't sustainable for you to stay in academia, then you'll leave eventually. So really checking in with yourself fairly often of, is this sustainable, what I'm doing? And if it's not, then what needs to change? And do I need to change, or do I need to switch the environment that I'm in, and so on. And another thing is that it takes community. I've done very little, if anything, here by myself. And I've gotten advice when I came here of build a community, and I was like, I'm shy, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay by myself. And that was a mistake when I first came in, and it's been so much enriching in my later years to have various communities in the psychology department, in the Black Strategies group, in the Alliance, off campus with people who aren't involved in any of this at all. And that really helps so that you really don't have to do everything yourself or know all the answers yourself. And that makes it, again, so it's sustainable and something that you can continue on in the future.